Hello, hello, and welcome to Grandma's Wealth Wisdom. We're live on YouTube and on Facebook, wherever you're catching us. Welcome. Be sure to hit that like button to let us know you're here, and the comments are open. Joining me today is Samantha, and I'm really looking forward to what she has to share about web design and profitability and all that fun stuff. We've got her full bio and links to her website and such like that below in the description. So be sure to check that out. Samantha, give us a little bit of the behind the scenes. What brought you to where you are today?
Okay, so thanks for having me, Amanda.
Yeah. Thanks for
Um,
being here.
yeah, my journey. So I am a business owner, but it has been kind of a long road into entrepreneurship. I went to college for architecture and I was decided I was going to be an architect. I was going to get all the certifications. And then after my 4-year degree, I was like, I don't want to go back to school for another 3+ years and do tests and all of this stuff. And so my original plan was to take a break and do an internship, and that did not pan out. Um, so I got married to my husband and was just applying for lots and lots of jobs where we lived, and ended up at this really small family run company where I was doing accounts payable, which is not my training at all. And then they discovered I could do design work. And so I started with their website. And when my husband relocated for his job, I followed him and continued to freelance for that company and started my business. It started as my idea was to have it be a DIY and recipe blog, but that doesn't work very well when you live in an apartment and you're not allowed to decorate anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into brands and just all kinds of graphic design, and eventually landed on websites as the one thing that I wanted to concentrate on and that I could help people with. And really, that is what lights me up. And that's what I'm doing now.
Cool. I love it. Um, and I love this focus on profitability, but I don't want to get there too quickly. We'll leave people in suspense. I know you've got some really great insight into how our websites can increase our top line and our bottom line profits. But take me back to like Samantha and your personal story with money. Like, what are some of those early memories of, learning how money works, what it's for, those kind of things?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian household. My parents were middle class, and they were really big into saving. So we very rarely ate out. We had to save for things. We never went without anything, and didn't feel like we didn't have stuff, but it was always kind of like money is to be saved, and you tithe and you don't spend a lot. And so it was almost, looking at it now, it's kind of a scarcity mindset of there's not enough money for people, especially if you wanted to go into something like running your own business. Or my cousin is a performer, she's an actress and a singer. And so, my parents are like, how does she make any money doing that?
Ah,
So that was kind of the mindset. And I have a brother and a sister, and we have three very different approaches to money. And so my parents were always talking about that with us. My sister is a saver, she saves everything that she makes. My brother is a spender, it's like in his pocket and out the door. And my parents were always like, no, you have to like save up for these things if you want them. And I kind of fall in the middle. I've learned more to be okay with spending than I was when I was younger. But that's really kind of where we started out. Was, money was something you had to be very careful with. You had to make sure you were using wisely. We learned, my parents had us learn the Dave Ramsey method when we got married and all of that. So they wanted it to be something we were very careful with. And I think that led to a little bit of fear around it, just not knowing what was going to happen, because the world is so crazy, and you never know, and you just want that kind of security of a savings account. And when you just start off, you don't have that. And so that was an interesting journey for me.
Yeah. I took a big takeaway from that part of your story. Like 3 kids raised in the same household, same parents, same, money mindset that they saw in their parents, and yet you each have your own way that that's impacted what you do with your money now.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just it's like as parents, we can do what we can, but there's so many different things like the personality of our kids, what happens as they become adults, what they choose to embrace or not, can vary widely. What do you as you start to look at, into adulthood and especially this entrepreneurial journey that you've been on, how have you seen your thinking about money shift over time?
I think the biggest shift was with my husband. He's very generous and he's more of a spender than I am. And so we approach things a little bit differently. And we've both had to kind of come to a middle point where I have to be okay with, okay, we can go out to dinner sometimes and that's all right. We can do things for our friends. We can buy them a nice meal and not feel like, oh my goodness, I have to count every penny. And he's learned, okay, we do need to have money in savings, especially now with a family and a house and all of this. So we have come together in that. And when I started my business, the big thing we talked about with money was like we couldn't afford for it not to be profitable pretty early on. And so we said, we gave me 5 years to really start to see a good profit from my business. And so, and I hit that pretty early. It's been pretty consistent. And that's been reassuring for me to know, okay, we had set this out and I know that I'm meeting that. And that is the piece that I contribute to our household. And as it grows, then we'll be able to do more with that money. But it has never been a thing of like everything was on me or the business doesn't have to make any money. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, so you've had to find that unique part of, oh, I think my husband's watching. He's asking if I can relate to the husband being the spender. Absolutely, 100%. Um, but it seems like so it was kind of non-negotiable. You had to make money from your business from day one. It didn't have to be a lot, but you did have to have some kind of take-home pay. You couldn't go into debt,
Yeah.
couldn't just break even. I love that. That probably drove a lot of innovation in how you started your business, and it started building that habit of paying yourself right away as
Mm-hmm.
well. There's so much good, juicy. Like if only more people thinking of starting their own thing would put those kind of parameters on their self. It probably did you find it made you more creative in terms of how you're going to go about building your business?
In some ways, I think it did. I was very lucky because I started my business freelancing for a company that I had worked for. I knew that I had a set amount of income, pretty set every month. And so I had that and I was like, okay, as long as my expenses are less than that and I can still pay myself, then I have the freedom to play around with what else I want to do, maybe invest in some things if I made more from another client. And that really helped me to be able to experiment with different things, to try different services and figure out what I wanted to do and what was going to be profitable in the business as far as, okay, what do I actually need to run this? What do I need to spend money on? What can I save?
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, I've got one more question, and then we're gonna shift to websites because I'm already seeing how all of this is gonna tie into, you do what you need to on your website and not more or less, stuff like that. But one more question about your personal journey. Um, as you actually did start to make money and see your business be successful, did you run up against any like, well, I have to put the money back in to keep my business growing? Was that like a temptation to not continue paying yourself more and more? or to like um, put money back in to help fuel growth? Like how did the growth journey go from there then?
I was pretty restrictive in what I would invest in the business. I never wanted to put everything back in. There have been times, like for a few months at a time, where I'll say, okay, I want to make this larger investment. We're gonna figure that out, but it hasn't been anything long term. So I really try to keep things lean. I have two contractors that work for me, but other than that, I don't have like any employee expenses or any of that. So I am able to cut back on things if I have to, or ramp up work if I need to do that, and have a lot of flexibility there. I think the bigger struggle for me was being pushing myself to charge higher prices for things, um, because it was so easy for me to sit down and do it. And it was hard for me to value that really where it should have been valued. And it's still something that I'm working on. But that was the bigger piece, is like, okay, I can make this money and then I will have more to do these things that I want to do in my business.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely a big thing. I think, especially as women, that seems to be a struggle is pricing for the value that we give and being comfortable with raising our prices. I'm a big like, yes, I can relate to that. Okay, um, let's talk about websites a little bit. I'm going to turn into student mode now. What do I need to know to make my website more profitable?
The number one thing that I've really been thinking about and talking about lately is making sure your website is really clear about who you work with and what you do. I was listening to a podcast with a high end coach, and she was talking about looking for somebody to hire for something. And she went to all these websites, she got all these recommendations, and she would land on somebody's website. And if it did not say right at the beginning that they offered what she wanted, she would just leave. She would go somewhere else. And when she found somebody that was like, I offer money mindset coaching or whatever it was, she was like, okay, I know that they know what they're doing. They are very clear on this is what they offer. So I'm interested in learning more. I think that is the number one thing people can do to see more profitability from their website, is internally figure out what you want to do and who you want to help, and then really clearly communicate that so people know as soon as they get onto your website if they're in the right place or not. And then that makes their decision to move forward in the process a whole lot easier.
Okay, I like it. Lots of clarity and making sure you've got that clarity and you're communicating that clarity. So there's kind of two parts, the copy, the words that you use, and then the design that goes along with those words. How do you see those working together to bring that clarity?
Yeah, so I'm not a copywriter, but I look at a lot of copy in my job. Excuse me. And so what I tend to tell people is that first thing that people see, we call it the above the fold section of your website, back from newspapers when they were folded. That headline that people see is really what's going to grab their attention. And it needs to be really good copy that speaks to who you work with and what you do, but it also has to be really well designed and on brand. So you, the big thing right now is to have a big header image that spans the whole page. You've got your headline on there. You've got a call to action button that's really clear and stands out. And then under that, people will probably see a little bit of text in that next section where you can dive into more about your values and who you help and the transformation you bring. And where that's one of those big places where design and copy meet, because if your design isn't good, people aren't going to read the copy. If the copy is not good, it doesn't matter how pretty your website is. They're not going to hire you.
Okay, I gotta say that again. If your design's not, or if your design's not good, Your copy might still shine through, but if your copy is not good, it doesn't matter how great your design is.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so when we're looking then for someone who can help us create the most profitable website, I know it can cost a fortune and it's kind of sometimes feels like a carrot out there, right? If I spend this much, then I will get
Mhm.
an ROI, but if I spend less, it's less likely that I'll get an ROI. And there's all this like confusion. What do I do? How do I make a good decision? What tips do you have there for hiring the right person or people?
My first tip is to really figure out where you are in your business. So for people starting out, I recommend that they figure out a way to DIY something. I use Squarespace for my designs. You can get a pretty decent looking website without hiring somebody. And if you are just starting out in your business and you don't have the money to invest in hiring a designer, just do that. That's the best way to test things out to get started. Once you know what you're doing, you know who it is that you want to work with, and you have some savings ready to invest, I like to tell people to look at what they actually need in a website. You might not need to hire a designer who's going to cost $10,000 because you just need something really simple. For my clients now, I do a VIP day where we design 4 pages of their website for people who offer a signature service or a signature course. And all 4 of those pages really push people towards taking action on that thing. They don't need tons of extra pages on the back end or different offers or e-commerce setup. And so I can do that at, it's not a low price point, but it's not as high as some designers because we really focus on this is what you need to actually get people to buy or apply to work with you or whatever that call to action is.
Okay. I love that you started with don't actually hire someone and if you're just starting out, that can't be said often enough. I feel like I've come across too many people that spend $5,000 on a website and they've never even sold anything or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Um, and then when we are ready to hire someone, I love the kind of keep the fluff out, do what you need to do, not much more. But how do we know what's fluff and what's actually going to be effective?
It's really about what you do. So if you have a service, you don't need a ton of stuff on your website. If you sell products, you're going to need a lot more robust system to do inventory and get things shipped and all of that back end stuff. So you're really looking at what your business model is. Do you offer one service to people or do you have multiple things that they can choose from? And that's a really good way to kind of measure how big of a website do I need? And then how do I find somebody who works on a platform that's going to work for me and can do all of these pieces? Because there are a lot of people who can make things look pretty. It's really about finding somebody who can help you narrow in on getting people to move through your website and take action if they're the right fit.
Gotcha. Okay. I've heard these terms like direct response websites or direct response marketing. It sounds like you're talking a little bit about that, even though I'm not an expert about it. Is that, am I like on the right path there? If we wanted to like think what's the technical term for how what this kind of web design thinking?
Um, I don't really think in those kind of terms
Okay.
either,
Okay.
but I think that probably makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Um, the other thing I was thinking is that, okay, I'm a content producer. I love, you know, bringing information on podcasts, on, YouTube. I know lots of our audience are also thinking about blogs or other kinds of content. Um, how do we make sure we're getting, that on our website effectively where it's not distracting from, but amplifying the, you know, call to actions to work with us and take those next steps?
Yeah, so most of my clients have blogs. I have a blog and a podcast on my website. So, really, the way to do that is to be very strategic in your main menu. So, the top of your website, in which pages you list there, And you can have a blog or a podcast there because people are going to be looking for that when they want to learn more about what you do. And on your homepage, you can also direct them to those sorts of places. And that way, if somebody says, hey, yeah, they're talking about something I'm interested in, but I'm not ready to invest with them yet, I want to learn more about what they do, what they teach, it's really easy for them to click on a blog link or a podcast link or go over to your YouTube. And all of that content helps with SEO because you're adding to your website, you're using all of that really good information to share with people that teaches them that you're an expert and also tells Google this person knows what they're talking about when it comes to this topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I love it. I want to share one thing, and then I'm going to put the ball back in your court for anything else you want to share. I have to tell. So this one time, I was going to hire a marketer, web design, like a firm, and I was thinking about hiring them. I went to their website, and it was horrible. And I was like, I know this is the case with so many professionals. We do for other people and we do really well for them, but we don't look at, ourselves. And it's
Mm-hmm.
actually very common in the financial sector too. So many financial professionals, they spend time helping other people create, the finances of their dreams, that they don't spend the time on their own, which I avoid like the plague, right? I spend lots of time on my own money because I feel like I got to walk the walk, and if I'm going to talk the talk. So I just have to tell people, I'm going to share my screen really quick, how amazing your website is. Because I was blown away at how, like, I've seen your website, right? I hadn't heard what you were going to share in this episode yet, but look at this: above the fold, clear headline, call to action. Over here, blog and podcast, right? Very clean, very effective, very amazing, and it does all the things you just talked about, right? So kudos to you for actually like having the stuff there. And of course, check out the process to profitability. You think I should be able to say that word without messing up the first time? The process to profitability podcast. Really amazing guests that she's had on there. Lemonandthesea.com is the place to find Samantha. I just had to give you some big kudos there. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Turn it back over to you. What anything else you want to be sure to share or communicate with the people listening?
I think the biggest thing to know about websites and profitability is that you always have the ability, if you have a good designer, to make changes after your website is done. So I designed that website back in 2020, and I have changed my homepage headline probably 6 times since then, trying to figure out what really works. Um, so you don't have to feel like you're locked into the specific content. And really, where you're going to see profitability is when you try stuff out and you change stuff, call to action buttons, all that kind of thing. Um, so I recommend like being open to changing your headlines sometimes if you need to, and figuring out what's really going to work and what really resonates with people. The other thing that I always tell people is to make sure that you're just looking at your website from an accessibility standpoint. Make sure it's legible for people. Don't use a really small font size or really light gray text that's hard to read. Just make sure that anybody who comes to your site can read it easily, because everybody has money to spend if they want to spend it with you. And if somebody lands on your site and they can't read it, they're going to bounce right off.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. You awakened the tinkerer in me. How often is too often to make updates to my website and tinker and play around with headlines and how it looks?
So if you're adding content like blogs and podcasts, you can do that whenever. It's not good to be consistent. Google likes when you're consistent on
Yeah.
things. If you want to change things like your images or your headline, I like to give it at least 30 days after you've changed it to see what the results are, like actually go into your numbers and see, did this make any difference? Sometimes you want to try it out for a little bit longer, like 90 days if you've made a big change. But, if you are, I have gone in every 2 days and played around with stuff, and then I will leave it for a longer period of time once I know where I want it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that extra tip and answering that question. Okay. Everybody, check out lemonandthesea.com and the Process to Profitability website. Give Samantha some love in the comments. If you are catching the replay, you can still ask a question there and we'll make sure that we get back to you. Okay. Thanks so much for joining us, Samantha. I'll look forward to seeing where things go from here.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.
Bye.